Welcome to the 800s, where we'll be discussing the On Thalanese Court, which is a really fun word to say because it's super long and has a bunch of syllables.
And with that, welcome to this week's episode of the 800s. I am your host, Alex, and you just heard from my wonderful co-host, Adam. Good job pronouncing that. We will talk more about all of the syllables as we go forward, and also shout out to our tech guy, Alan, who makes all of this happen. Thanks for that every single time we do this. So why don't we just go ahead and jump into our plugs?
Sure thing. If you joined us for our before the show, you heard some music that was Fearless First from Incompetech. They have a bunch of cool scores and audio options. You should check them out, especially if you have like a ambiance you want to set. They've got some great mood tunes to play in the background. Go to incompetech.filmmusic.io for more. I would also like to direct you guys to our YouTube channel, where we post all of our videos, including the 800s. We also have a couple of discussions and whatnot. So if you want to see more of our faces or hear more of our voices, you should check out our YouTube channel. The link is below your video. If you like audiobooks, I suggest you take a crack at Audible. Audible has all the audiobooks you could ever want and more. If you'd like to check them out for a 2-month free trial or a 1-month free trial or whatever it is they offer, go to dmstable.com/audible. And if you want to know more about us, dmstable.com is the place to go. Everything that we talk about will be on dmstable.com. And if you want links to anything and you don't want to remember anything else, dmstable.com has your back. So check it out. I'd also like to talk about our socials, Facebook and Twitter, at the DM's Table for Facebook and at DM's Table for Twitter. Reach out to us there or follow us for updates on what's going on with the DM's Table. And if you really, really, really like to talk to us or just are looking for a cool nerd culture to hang out with, might suggest joining our Discord. If you would like to join our Discord, hit us up on our socials. We talk about books, nerd stuff, video games, 3D printing, the whole shebang. So check it out. And the two primary ways we have income for this show is Patreon and Etsy. Patreon link is below your video. We're the DM's Table on Patreon. There is where you'll be granted the ability to vote on what book we read next. We put up a 3-book choice every month for you guys to choose what you want us to read and discuss. So if that interests you, head over to Patreon. There's a couple other things there too that might pique your interest. And Etsy, dmstable.com/Etsy. We sell nerd culture 3D printed objects. It's pretty dope. Man, I don't have any laying around, but they're super cool stuff. I thought I had the bookmark with me, but I guess I don't. It's super cool 3D printed stuff. Can be yours today. Go to dmstable.com/Etsy. And that's about it for the plugs.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have one of those as a keychain, but we have been told to not sell that particular one because copyright. So unfortunately, I can't share that with you, but we do come up with plenty of copyright-safe stuff, so check it out. Anyways, this week on the 800s, we will be discussing The Goblin Emperor by Katherine Addison, first of the Chronicles of Ozrith books. Maio awakens in his cold bed to find his exile to the fringes of the Ithuvaraz kingdom have come to an end. His father and elder brothers are dead, lost in an airship explosion, and he has just been named ruler of the Elven Kingdom. He must travel to Ketho and take his place in the Unthalanese court, which he has not visited since the death of his mother and his exile some 10 years ago at the age of 8. Upon his arrival, he faces subterfuge, manipulation, and even assassination attempts. along with some general racism, as he seeks to become the Goblin Emperor.
Yeah. If this is your first time joining us for this show, I'll give you a quick rundown of how we operate. We're a discussion show. We discuss the book and questions or topics from the book. So if you guys have anything you want to talk about at any time, go ahead and throw it in chat. Alex and I will pick a topic for discussion. He and I will go back and forth with our answers about that topic or question, and then we'll go over to chat, see what chat has to say about it. So if you have anything to say about a topic or question, throw it in chat, and we'll grab it and be like, hey, so-and-so thinks this is cool, or whatever you want to say about it. And of course, the show is much more entertaining with audience participation. So if you have your questions, don't hesitate to throw them in there. Even if we're in the midst of talking about something, at any time you can throw it in there. We look at all the messages, so any time is a good time. There's no bad time to throw out a topic.
Also, just a quick reminder and disclaimer, this is a show for adults. We cover adult themes and topics, many of which were to be had in this book. So bring kids around only at your own discretion. And while we try not to swear too much, it does happen from time to time. So also, we're trying to create a fun and supportive environment over at DM's table where people can feel free to share their love of the things they love without any fear of judgment or reprisals or teasing or anything like that. So in sum, be nice or fuck off.
Interesting hand gesture addition there.
I'm trying to learn sign language. No.
Universal sign language right there, right?
Mostly, yeah.
All right, with that, let's get the discussion going. What were your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts were I was a bit weirded out by how this book started and how kind of Victorian it sounded. Like, honestly, you would never know that this was a fantasy setting until about like 10 chapters in. Like I almost wouldn't know. Like, there's casual mentions of the characters like gray skin color and pointed ears, but like I was caught off guard by how casually in the background the fantasy elements were and how this was mostly just a character driven story. I also, like, so I had to adjust to that because I'm used to something like the Goblin Emperor probably having a high fantasy element to it, and lo and behold, it's like Victorian, like steampunkish, industrial revolution kind of era. And it was a bit unexpected to begin with, and then once I kind of readjusted my expectations for the book, I found it to be both compelling and a bit confusing. And we'll talk more about why. Not the least of which is all those syllables you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah. They seem to mean something. Yeah, I was primed for this to be a high action Game of Thronesy book, just because it opens with an assassination plot that didn't just manage to kill the emperor, but also the emperor and his three eldest sons. Like, what a huge death blow to start a book off with, you know? And it just kind of peaked there for me, excitement wise. Like, it kind of got into a groove of explanations and stayed there the rest of the book. I was really expecting a high action, edge of your seat kind of novel because of the start, but Obviously, he gets there, and then it's pretty tame adventure after that.
Yeah, VS Drake says that they're primed for the book because they just finished that Netflix series, Catherine. And yeah, that high court stuff definitely, I can see how you were kind of primed for that. Um, I wonder though if it was your expectation or if it just was made it easier for you to settle into it because you had already just like had your mind in that mindset for a little bit. But VS Drake says that they felt like the tone was pretty solid throughout. What do you think about that statement, Adam?
Yeah, it was pretty consistent, I'd say, except for that attention grabbing beginning. It kept a pretty consistent tone. I will say it felt like the author used um, some complex writing in the introduction, and then kind of tapered that out as we went along, or I just got used to it. But it's definitely not what you normally expect from a fantasy novel, in terms of prose and presentation. Usually you expect more like a internal dialogue sort of scenario, where this was more of a Tolkien level dialogue.
That was the exact example I was going to use to describe the prose. Is it was very thick, felt kind of academic almost, and that's very much so the way that like Tolkien likes to write, especially when you talk about like having 100 different names to remember, um, and the way in which the world was built through that specific type of prose. And I'm with you. I had to kind of check in with myself to make sure that it was like, was it the writing that changed or was it my perception of it that changed? And ultimately, I think it's a little of both, but I think it was, at least for me, it was more me getting used to it. And there is an element to it that did shift because the conditions of the main character shifted. So it felt a bit purposeful because he starts off with Setharus, and Setharus makes him be incredibly extra formal, and he has had to live in that state for 10 years, and all of a sudden he's free to be more himself than ever before and less himself than ever before at the same time. And I think the writing shifts a little bit with that, which was interesting to me. I don't know if that was purposeful or not, though.
V.S. Drake says, "What did you guys think the book was trying to accomplish, and did it do it?"
Would you like to start, or would you like me to?
Why don't you take a crack?
Honestly, this particular book felt like it was trying to establish. I felt like it was trying to just establish world building and the type of book that it wanted. That it wanted this, like, I didn't realize it was a series, but that it wanted the series to be. It it picked a very specific lane in which to build the world and stuck with it hard. For better or for worse, I think it accomplished that because I'm very, very aware of how the court works, and I'm very aware, and I'm a lot more aware of like expectations on an emperor. I'm not super familiar with like court type proceedings, or at least I wasn't before this book. Um, you know, where I think it very much was. I don't know. It didn't feel like a book that was meant to accomplish telling a full story. It felt more like setup that had a political thriller backdrop, you know?
Yeah. V.S. Drake says it felt like it was a really long prologue, and she had a story to tell, and she told it. But man, by the end, this was not really a book I needed to read. I definitely agree with like the really long prologue part, and I think the 100% from V.S. Drake is in terms of world building. I'm actually going to disagree with you guys on the world building part. I don't think this book did a good job of world building because really the only details we got are about the court. We got a couple of details about a keep in the mountains, um, the place that he started out in. I forget what it was called. Well, anyway, um, we got details about like there was that river, but we don't really know much about the kingdom as a whole. We know there's a goblin kingdom somewhere off to the side. But even so, the details that we get are kind of, you already know about this. I'm just discussing what's happening, kind of a feel to it. So I felt like it wasn't necessarily world building, it was more um, the world has been built and we're living in it. We're experiencing a highly fleshed out world, but it's not being built.
Yeah, thank you for calling me out on that. Because like the more you described that, I was like, yeah, world building was the wrong word for it. It was more character building almost within a world that, like you said, is clearly fleshed out, but not to us, you know, because the elements that came, it felt a little bit like world building because the elements that it pulled all seemed to fit into whatever story she was trying to tell. But you're right. The actual world building that we get out of it is fairly minimal considering how much other stuff we get.
Yeah.
You know, within the court, like V.S. Drake said, it was, it was we got very super detailed but shallow world building. And shallow in that it was a very narrow part of the world that we get because that's all our main character gets. And the rest is all context clues and history books, you know?
Yeah. I think an important fact to remember is that Maya was the 209th emperor, which means like at this point, there's nobody who remembers the beginning of the empire. Like it's been set in stone. Nobody knows anybody who remembers anything about how the empire came about. It's all just history books at this point. And um, like the entire book, I kept thinking, why doesn't somebody just kill Maya and take over? It feels like he's totally incompetent. Like this doesn't make sense. And then I would remember, oh yeah, he's the 209th. At this point, everybody's just like, oh yeah, it's just some person that happens to rule the empire.
When you have to figure somewhere in that 209, there's a comparison of, well, we've had worse. You know?
And V.S. Drake also mentioned he loves political books and court stories like this, but it felt like a swing and a miss. And I'd have to agree with that statement. Like I was ready for a lot of wit and intrigue and quick political maneuverings so that Maya didn't get usurped, but there wasn't really much of that there. Like there was obviously the plot from his, I don't know what you call it, previous step. I don't know. The one lady who was married to his dad before he existed.
Yeah, his. You mean, are you talking about his dad's like fourth wife, or the second, or the second wife. Sorry, the first wife.
The one who tried to take him off the throne.
Yeah, so the fourth wife.
Yeah. Like I kept expecting more stuff like that to happen, and Maya to have to be super clever or have an ally in his pocket who could protect him, kind of a deal. But just wasn't much of that going on.
I fully understand this being a miss, like, because this one rode the edge for me. There were enough compelling elements that I might give the second book a try, but it's gonna have to hook me hard or I'm gonna be out, type of thing, because I can't take another slog like that. And I was wondering, on that note, what, if any, redeeming elements did you find in this book to the obvious struggles we had with? Like, what was the standout redeeming element?
I definitely say that the author put in a ton of background work to begin with. Like, this is obviously an incredibly fleshed out idea for society. And, you know, all the machinations with formal address and non-formal address, all the grammar structure that existed in the story was just like on point. Like it felt really shoot, what do you call it when you like you're in the world? Felt like
Immersive.
It really sucks you in. Immersive. It felt really immersive in that regard, that it was like, you know, the author committed to a specific theme and way that the story was going to be told and never deviated from that. And I'd say that the writing overall was pretty good in regards to, you know, sticking to the theme and all that. I'd say that that's my highest redeeming qualities. That like medieval court theme that ran through the book.
Yeah, the theme and the setting. It seems like Viestre completely agrees with you that they love the structure of the society, the court structure itself, and that and I like this mention that the people in the story felt like they had strong, and I'll add, believable motivations. You know, anywhere from, you know, you've got the wow, I'm blanking. It was the basically like the hand out of Game of Thrones. What's the name? The Chancellor, or whose thing is like, we had a specific vision for the kingdom. I can't let you disrupt that. There is the the evil stepmother character who's actually like barely older than him, who like I actually really loved that reveal of, she is never known how not to be in power. Like she felt like at her deepest core is that she was meant to be the one leading other people. And I think that might be one of the most blatantly self-aware reveals for why somebody is like an evil stepmother type character. So the author took a trope and made it not only believable, but a compelling element to that character, to the villain of all things. So I thought that was, you know, subtly but really well done, because I was kind of getting tired of the, oh well, she's just mad to be mad, she's just like, you know, she's a bitch. Like, And like she's probably just racist and entitled, and it was less entitled and more that's just the core of who she is. And I've fully respected that decision, and she took something that I was getting tired of and made that character compelling with that reveal. And I think that is what I think is the most redeeming element of the story, is her ability to, with, I did enjoy the setting, like, in that hard commit to it, like you guys did. But the thing, and this is what tilted me over the edge to why I might read the second book, is her ability to take certain characters and really flesh them out in believable ways, make them complex and not just tropes for the sake of being tropes, was what really kept me going. I use the stepmother as the example, but my favorite character, and I'll start this off, was Maya. So who was your favorite character, and what made him your favorite?
Yeah. Let's kind of throw in the other half of V.S. Drake's question there too.
All right.
What other characters did you appreciate as well written? It's kind of a tag on to what you already asked, but
yeah, I'll add it on for the chat.
I liked the what are they called? Nohetchere?
Yeah, the guards.
Yeah.
The ones that are committed to him for life.
The first Nohetchere.
Yeah.
I really like them, how they're especially like Kala, how Kala was like, I can't be your friend because I'm your guard. That's just how it is. I really liked the idea of like they're always there, so they're kind of like advisors to him because they're always there. But at the same time, they serve the purpose of protecting the emperor, and they don't care about who he is. It's the fact that he is the emperor. I thought they stuck to their role really well, and I liked that trope of I can't be your friend, so knock it off. And then at the end, he comes around. He's all like, I understand what you're saying because it makes sense, but how about we establish some sort of friendliness between us? I thought that was his interactions with his guards show Maya's growth throughout the book really well. So in that aspect as well, I thought they were a really important and really well done characters.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up, and I like that you bring up that they are kind of like this foil to him, so that you get this kind of look at Maya's progression throughout the story, through his ability to create relationships when you have these hardline people who have a very clear set of rules about this is what we do, this is how we operate, and he's able to work within that while still forging relationships. And again, done in a believable way, but it doesn't work if those characters aren't fleshed out enough for you to understand that their growth is his growth,
Mm-hmm.
So I absolutely agree. Great characters. V.S. Drake says that they loved Sevek. And that's the he's the secretary / the courier who gives him the initial note telling him that he's emperor. That he was a great way to facilitate inner workings of the court to the main character without being too, hand wavy about it. This is a character that by their nature should know these things, which I agree. And I do like, again, that this character had depth. Like this Drake said, that he has his own scars. So what did you think of Civic?
He was um he he kind of served like a multi-purpose role for Maya, right? He was not only his secretary, but anytime Maya had a question about pretty much anything, he asked him. He was I feel like he served the role as not just secretary, not just mirror of Maya for his own scarred past and stuff, but he he served as Maya's, one true friend in court, which is an important thing to have when you're all alone.
Yeah, and if not friend, at the very least, he was a confidant, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a theme throughout, is Maya trying to figure out how he's going to just not go insane from the sheer loneliness of being emperor. And I think we've basically pinpointed the two things that are going to keep him sane. Possibly three, and I'll bring that up later. But the, Sevet and the Nohetere provide this kind of stability and understanding and concern that he needs to have from other people, to know that like he's valued at least somewhat beyond just being a person who wears the crown, like the thing that wears the crown, Yeah. And without that, like, it's not believable that he would want to step down. Would not want to step down. Like, he was given that option to go be a monk. And, even he has thoughts about it. So, and if it weren't for those sorts of people, that element isn't believable. And those are probably parts of the reasons why Maya became my favorite character, is his ability to stick to who he is in such a way that he is able to create these relationships out of what should have been nothing otherwise, if not for him being the character that he is. You see his growth through other people's growth, which is good writing and a good way to find growth in the real life, in my opinion. So honestly, this could have been a little human dude, and I would have known any different from him being a goblin. For all that's worth, it was just a context for exploring prejudice, but
yeah, it didn't feel like we had like specific details about differences between elves and goblins. It was just a I think it was just a stereotype trope thrown in there.
Well, I mean, yeah, it was a very easy way for, I think this is where the author relies on us to do a little bit of the legwork, is I think when you throw goblins and elves out, there's one that rises and one that falls in a lot of people's like general opinions. As far as, like, they don't mesh well together typically in those who read fantasy's minds. And so this conflict is meant to seem innate without being explained. And it's just kind of left at that. And it's just a means of saying this person is treated with prejudice for no actual reason. They just do things a little bit differently. And look a little bit different.
V.S. Drake says he thought Savitt was going to end up being a spy for the Chancellor. I definitely that definitely makes sense. That would have been a nice backstab plot. Um, I didn't think about that while I was reading it, but yeah, that would have been an entertaining plot twist.
I was with
He likes the.
VS. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say he liked the ear usage too. Fun thing with the ears, we use as a signal to tell what people are actually feeling. It's definitely. I guess that's definitely one of the things that was mentioned more about goblins than elves.
Well, they both did it. It was just more noticeable, I think, for the goblins because I think their ears were bigger and they typically had loud jewelry in them. So, uh, that is actually one thing culturally speaking that I thought was interesting was the use of knots by goblins to um, show like to signal different things. I thought that was kind of an interesting little cultural element. I was hoping for more of that, but didn't exactly get a lot of it.
So we talked about what the book did well. What was missing from the book?
Um, I think one of the biggest things that was missing from the book was probably any sense of escalating tension. It just kind of it it goes back to what V.S. Drake said earlier about it holding the same tone the whole way through. There's a couple little blips, but usually speaking, when you have a political thriller, you expect the tension to like more, there's going to be dips and stuff, but there's a rise, there's a climax, and then you settle back down into whatever. And this felt more like blip, blip, like it was like reading a heart monitor, or a less like a nearly dead heart monitor anyway. Like as far as like tone, but there's just this consistent tension the whole way through, and I know that's part of the immersion because that's what our main character is feeling is this consistent tension all the way through. But even in the part where he gets kidnapped, I was like, the tension never felt higher in any way because it was always set at this like semi-high bar the whole way through, and it's just like, yeah, and then moves along. And I don't know, it just didn't feel like the tension built. It was just always there. And so I think a little more variation in the tone might have served the author well in making this a little more compelling. Didn't even necessarily need to be action, but there needed to be something to hold on to. Like, because I was waiting for the love interest thing in some way to play into that, to build the tension or to relieve the tension in such a way that something else could rebuild it. And it just barely did. It was just all these tiny little blips because they were all in the same register. And yeah, so
Yeah.
that's what I thought was missing.
Yeah, for me, I'd agree, and it looks like V.S. Drake agrees with us too. There's no suspense. What V.S. Drake said felt like they're trying to do intrigue, but it was just no tension. It was monotoned. Yeah, I feel like the main plot that we started out with was the emperor was assassinated. Who did it? We don't know. We got to find out. And then that kind of just gets dropped because, the speaker for the dead guy or whatever his title was left.
All right, chill, Ender.
He left, and that was it. That entire plot line just paused when he left. And when it came back, it was just kind of like, oh yeah, by the way, the guy who tried to kill you was also the guy who killed your dad and brothers. Like that part felt so disconnected from the story after the coronation, after the funeral, after the one dude left. It just was like, should the plot have been something else? Should the main plot have been, it's hard to adjust to court life. And yeah, it was
Yeah.
sorry, I was reading VS Drake's. Uh the book needed the coup attempt earlier. I definitely agree with that. Like it felt like he was super worried about the Lord Chancellor from the get-go, and all he had to do to tame the Lord Chancellor was show up and get coronated.
Hmm. Yeah, I I agree. I think one of the biggest mistakes I think that could have been rectified, or I don't want to speak for the author or anything, but I think one of the issues is that you start out with a scene that creates the kind of tension that you would expect from a plot-driven story, right? Because it starts off with very heavy plot. Yeah, you have a character and you have some of that, but that's normal for the beginning. But you start off with the assassination of an entire family of people, and that to me screams this is going to be a plot-driven story. And then it sets up that tension and just rides it as this character-driven story. And I don't mind, you know me, I actually like character-driven stories. I very much do. But when you set somebody up for a plot-driven story and you give them this like more monotone character-driven story, something is going to feel off,
Yeah.
And it specifically, because like you cut that out, like you said, I think you pointed out the exact instance that it happens is when the solution is to like, oh, we'll just do this first and get it out of the way. Plot goodbye. In comes the character driven.
Yeah.
I mean, it
VS
was
Drake says,
smart.
yeah,
It
that
was the
was the
right thing
swing
to
and a
do.
miss.
It was the smart right thing to do to get coronated immediately. Like that was the politically right thing to do. But for a story, like it seemed like the author didn't know which they were going to do almost, at the beginning, which is confusing for some readers and disappointing for others. And
Yeah. I hate to say this because like I feel bad for saying this without a solution, but like, you know, I feel like there was a better way to go about the story, like the setup for the story and then the transition to the court life. I feel like there had to have been a better way. I just don't know what it would have been. I feel bad for saying, you should have done it differently without having it differently in mind.
yeah, and I think uh, I think I'm right there with you because the closest thing I can think of was maybe pick a direction earlier on or find a way to give yourself more bandwidth to work with from an emotional intention standpoint,
Yeah.
which I don't think she did. Like, because she set the bar so damn high, and just rode the whole way. And you know,
VS Drake wants to know where the editor was.
um, yeah, I'm also struggling with this idea of like that things have to have the kind of story that we're used to having because like I also have complained about things being too prototypical of telling story in a certain way, but there's a reason why stories do work in a certain way is because over thousands of years of storytelling we've found what works and what doesn't for us as like a species, you know,
Yeah.
to at least to a degree. And um I felt like, yeah, I agree. There's something missing. And I think VS Drake hit it right on the head. Is that there's a ton of great bones to this. The character work. There's elements of the world building that are really interesting. Um, it just got maybe too focused.
Yeah.
All right.
Uh,
Well, did you have another question?
I was gonna bring up character growth. What examples of character growth did you notice, and what did you like seeing in the characters?
Um, I I'm trying to like stay away from like necessarily the main character, but like it's hard not to gravitate towards there because that is a huge part of that where this went. And I think Maya, I loved seeing Maya's character growth in his acceptance of his himself throughout the book, and his overcoming of the trauma of losing his mom in the way that he did at such a young age, and he the author did a really good job of giving him a way to like giving him stakes within himself, you know, because when he's confronted by in the tombs, if you recall,
Mm-hmm.
or when he's confronted there, he's basically given a choice of step up or give up, more or less. And he has to look within himself and choose to step up, to choose to forge these relationships, and to recognize that he isn't incompetent because of his lack of ability. It's just his lack of experience. And he sees this all through the like he basically does that thing where he reverts to himself at 8 and has that conversation more or less within himself through his mother. And the complexity of that and fully understanding how difficult that sort of choice can be for some people, I thought it was really well done in a way that could have been trivialized or used as a gimmick, and it wasn't, you know?
Yeah. What was his nephew's name?
Hold on just a minute.
The
I've got a list of all the names here, dude.
Yeah, I cannot
the,
remember.
I know who you're talking about,
Thinking of
and
it.
he would have been my other the problem is that there's like a whole bunch of cousins and half bro I believe it's actually
Yeah.
technically his half brother, isn't it?
No, he's
It's Idra.
his brother's son. Idra. Yep. Idra is his brother's son.
Oh yeah, you're right. So it is his nephew that he calls cousin. I knew it wasn't a cousin.
Yeah.
He's a nephew he calls cousin.
They they refer to any family member as cousin,
Yeah, but I think there's actually
as like
one in
a
there that is like his actual cousin, though. You know,
yeah.
I think there's like
Cousin is
one.
the formal familial greeting,
Yeah,
which I
yeah.
thought was a
Idra
cool.
Drazar was his nephew and his heir.
Yeah. I thought that was a cool little aspect thrown in there too, is like um you have different ways of addressing people, whether you want to be formal or informal. Everybody uses the royal we thing, was kind of jarring but kind of cool. um I really liked Idra's growth. We don't really know Idra a whole lot. He doesn't get a ton of screen time, but the the moment we meet him, and then the moment where Maya's being overthrown, essentially, are the two resounding moments that Idra's personality is defined. And I think it's a different Idra we see in both cases. where at the beginning he's like, I'm just here. I'm too young to know anything for myself, and I know that. And then, his mom puts him on the spot, slash Maya puts him on the spot, and he's like, now you listen here. I'm not gonna overthrow my uncle here just because you want me to, Mom. I know you're probably gonna get freaking executed for this, but I'm not doing it. And I especially like that moment because I think that moment is what helps Maya become more assertive himself. Because as he's telling the whatever old guy when he's discussing that moment, the investigator for the crime thing, the witness, the old witness guy, when he's talking about that moment when he's like, go get Idra. I'm not signing anything until you go and get Idra. And he's like, I don't know what I expected from Idra. I just knew that it was right to have him there. It's really I think a turning point for Maya, where before that moment he was like, I'm not the one to lead anyone. I don't know what's best for anyone. And after that moment, he's like, I'm going to start forcing my ideas on people. I'm going to start making sure my voice is heard, not just what's expected of me.
Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks to the depth of the characters as a whole, right? Is their ability to learn, like actually learn from each other, like human beings, well, like living intelligent beings do.
Yes.
But like I think my slip up there also points to a bit of the problem is that like this is just human, like there, other than the ears bit, like it's hard. It barely makes it barely makes it into the fantasy realm of things. And Via Strike is right. Sethris was the actual cousin. Like when he called him cousin, he was the actual cousin.
For real cousin.
So we talked a little bit about like the world building being a bit, for lack of a better word, uneven. Like one thing I know that they did have was like there's a lot of focus on like language and court decorum and things like that. What was one element of world building that you got a glimpse of that you wish there would have been more of?
Yeah, I really wish we got more details about the surrounding villages and the workers, specifically in relation to the bridge they wanted to build. We got the impression that, well, I should say I got the impression that the bridge was kind of like a nobility versus my gosh, blanking so hard tonight. Nobility versus peasants kind of thing, where the nobility would not benefit at all from this bridge, but the peasants would. And I kind of wish that we got to see like Maya go out to this river and meet with the people who need to cross the river and experience the life of an everyday citizen of this empire, where in reality our entire lens of what it's like to live in this empire is from a nobility perspective.
To me that felt a little intentional, and I wasn't sure like that I jived with the reasoning for the decision, but the decision felt consistent with the theme that somebody who is placed in this lofty position is so far removed from the people that even getting to them to do that is nigh impossible. it was hard enough just to get the meeting with the guy who's basically one of the great minds of the Clockworkers Guild, let alone somebody who's like an average everyday citizen, you know? And
Yeah.
maybe that's something that gets explored later on, but yeah, you're right. It would have felt really nice to kind of get a reasoning for that. I found myself filling in a lot of gaps, which again, I think the authors seem to be relying on us to do because of the clear parallels with like industrial age, late Victorian age America and UK, where UK especially, where in the US it'd be more like the robber barons, but in the UK it's obviously the Queen and but there's this clear divide of we have these everyday people, like they talking about like factories and working in the factories and people getting constantly getting injured, child laborers, that sort of thing. Like all of these problems that we saw in our history were used as, and it was kind of an analogy for that clash that you mentioned. And it was something that I think actually, like you said, could have been very well used to build tension or to relieve tension in such a way that you get a little more of that like actual storytelling, actual like plot storytelling, but it wasn't, because this was meant to be like at a certain point this just became character driven and that was all it was. So it looks like V.S. Drake said that they would have liked to see a lot more scenes with the Goblin Society and like the differences with the Elvis Society. I think we only saw at court, so yeah, maybe a little bit more of like the average person's differences. Although we did get a kind of oh, well, you stole it, V.S. Drake. You got ahead of me. Not stole it, but you read my mind. We got a small glimpse of it with that witness, is that when he went to talk to the people where the airships were being made, right?
Mm.
We couldn't see it through the main character's lens, so we had to see it through somebody who could access them.
I want to add on to there was one aspect of this story that I am surprised I didn't want more of, and that's the magic that existed in the story. It was obviously magic because his Nohetire kill a guy with magic.
Mm-hmm.
But it felt like magic had its place in society and it wasn't the forefront. It wasn't like, Stormlight Archive where the entire world works on the magic system. It's like magic exists, but it's just this thing that's over here. It's like firearms in modern day society.
Yeah, I agree with you that I didn't necessarily want more of it, but I wanted to know more of why it wasn't more prominent. Like, if you have access to magic, why is it not more prominent? Why are you going straight up steampunk? Like, they're talking about using coal. Is it just a matter of efficiency, or is it a matter, like, because only a very select few can learn how to do magic? There's something of an implication of religious reasons tossed around, but it's so like tossed off and like left to float in the wind. V.S. Drake, it very well be so hyper rare that for a society that has grown to a certain extent, it's just not feasible to make it the reason behind you, like the way in which you build your society, which would make sense, but they don't really fully explain that, and that irked me a little bit. That was going to be my thing, that like my missing element is I was like, I want to know the why of why magic isn't like more prominent and why they're in this steampunkish society.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what V.S. Drake said though. It was like there was other things that I wanted more than a fleshed out magic system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of other things that are obviously uh, would have been nice to have, like, in general, more cultural context for stuff like we talked about, and uh, more in general understanding why there's these tensions in between places. We get glimpses of it, like with the barbarians. It's like, yeah, you built, obviously, narratively speaking, analogous to what's done to the Native Americans. You built your castle on their gravesite. It's the Indian graveyard thing, you know.
Yeah.
But like, it just feels very half-hearted. So I would. That's actually secretly what I'm hoping I'll get more of when I go to book, if I choose to do book 2. But yeah, V.S. Drake's was right. It was low on the list of wants, but it was there. I'm curious what you think of this. So V.S. Drake says that they love the religious scenes. What did you think of those?
I found it interesting, especially like the thing where they had witnesses for dead people and stuff. They had um, specific rituals that they performed. I'd say the biggest details we get religious wise was when uh, the the one Nohetre guy has to kill himself for betraying the emperor. Um, it was pretty interesting to see uh, those details be there because they would be there, right? um, it wasn't one of my main focus points, but I felt like they were done well.
Yeah, I
You?
would tend to agree. And V.S. Drake actually brings up one of my favorites as well, as the scene of of Maya meditating, and how meditation is treated as like a religious act. And I liked that a religious act didn't have to be this big showy thing, like, for lack of a better example in my head, Game of Thrones, like when they show up for like the to the temple every single time. It's this big, either gaudy representation of groveling before the guy, or the leader, or it is the exact opposite, where you are going to a man who is making of himself a martyr, essentially. It was like these big grandiose things, and I liked that it was subtle and it felt meaningful without having to know necessarily a lot about the religion itself, you know?
Yeah. I forgot about the meditating part. I just glossed over it in my mind because I was thinking it was more like a political ritual and less religious.
But yeah, they
But
mention
yeah,
it
it's definitely a religious.
yeah, the author mentions it very briefly that it was frowned upon because it was like a goblin religious thing specifically, you know. So doing that in the Enthalenese court would have been, you know, off-putting or whatever. But I also like the fact that, like, spirituality, while out of vogue, didn't have to be the prototypical bad guy, you know. It would have been very easy to lean into that, but instead they leaned into the characters rather than institutions.
Yeah. Or do you have anything else you want to talk about tonight, or shall we get into our thoughts?
I could probably talk about this one. There's a lot to talk about, but let's go into final thoughts for tonight.
All right. But what were your final thoughts?
Ultimately, I think I understand why there are people who love this book, and I fully understand why there are people who are not going to. I loved the character-driven pieces of this because they were very, very well done. Some of the better character-driven work that we've read on this show. However, I think the focus got a little narrow, and when you set it up with a big action teaser, it just something fell off throughout. For me, there was enough compelling that I might go on to the next one in the hopes that the second book fills in the gaps a bit better and has a more cohesive vision of itself and has a little more, variability, I guess, in tone. But it is a book that I would not recommend to most people. You better love yourself character-driven stuff, and you better love, this is not a beginner's book, let's put it that way, by any means. I would only read this to advanced and very dedicated readers. I was finding myself occasionally looking up a word or two in this book, which is pretty rare for me. Especially these days. But like I said, I probably wouldn't recommend it to most people, but I think there is an audience for this that would very much enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree with what V.S. Drake is saying. It wasn't a bad book. It definitely didn't feel like a bad book. A lot of what you said, there was a lot of intricate writing involved in this book. I feel like an index card of characters and locations would have made it a little easier to navigate this book, but it missed the mark for me, just because the story was just so, the plot was just so lackluster and never stuck with a single line of plot. And it felt like there needed to be some urgency that just wasn't there. A lot of big words early on that I definitely didn't know. I feel like the world was extremely well built outside of this book. We talked about that a little bit earlier tonight. And I want to give props to the author for constructing a highly intricate world and sticking to the construction really well. I just would have liked a Watson character to have the world explained to a little bit, so I knew what was going on.
Yeah, we kind of got a half Watson in Sevet, but like you said, we get to know only what Maya asks about, and it's within that narrow bit.
Yeah. I probably won't read book 2, and I probably won't return to this book. I'm not necessarily mad that I read it, though.
V.S. Drake is very much just, they don't think it was a bad book, but they feel misled. And the book felt like it didn't know what it wanted to be, and that it's a no from me, dog. Quoting V.S. Drake.
He's clearly much younger than we are.
What are you talking about? That's like an American Idol circa 2000 reference.
Yeah, he's still talking like he's like he's young.
So maybe he's older and going through a midlife crisis. What do we know? Sorry to speculate about you guys. We're not trying to make anybody feel bad. We're just joshing around.
Where you can't hurt us.
No, feel free to lob them back if you want, honestly. As long as, again, remember, be nice or fuck off. Yeah, I agree that I doubt this will be the worst book that we read for the year. I honestly wouldn't even consider it the worst one to this point. but yeah, this one definitely isn't for everybody, and I'm I'm fully understanding of those who want nothing more to do with it. And I think that says a lot in of itself. So with
Shall
that,
we do end of night things?
yep. Why don't you tell us what book we're reading next, Adam?
Sure thing. Super excited. Sorry for the one that won tonight. First, we have Happy Place by Emily Henry for July 29. That's our beach read book. That's right, Alex? It's a beach read.
That's correct.
That was the theme.
Yeah.
After that, we have Back to School, and one of my personal favorite books is Superpowers Year One by Drew Hayes. It's going to be for August 26th.
I always like when we get to read like favorites of like one or the other of us, so, or our tech guy Alan's, especially like to be able to kind of get a read on both reread and new to the book. So I'm excited for that one as well. Coming up though for October, as usual, we are going to be doing spooky horror thriller themed books for our Halloween month. That probably won't change for the discernible future. And then afterwards into November, I think books to be thankful for. So what's a book that you are thankful that you've read for whatever reason?
Interesting theme. Do we have a September theme or no?
Sorry, I thought. Whew, my bad. August was back to school, and September is going to be original recipe. That's all bets are off. Let's see what you got.
Okay, that sounds good. Have you been reading anything other than our 800s books? Anything you've been reading?
Yes, I think I mentioned that I was just starting to get back into the Magic 2.0 series. I have to say I have been pretty disappointed in books 4 and 5. Book 6 kind of comes back around to being all right, but man, I think this might be the first one where I would actively tell people to, like, unless you can't not finish a series, leave it at book 3.
Beatrix still chugging away at Arcanum Unbound.
That's actually
I
probably one on my list for coming up, like my next
Arcanum
one.
Unbound.
Yeah.
I finished the original Mistborn trilogy. Kicking it over to, gosh, I don't even remember what the new one's called. Just pull it up on my phone real quick. The Silence of Unworthy Gods. It's an Andrew Rowe book. Part of the series Arcane Ascension, book 4. Super excited for that. That just came out earlier this year. I believe we did sufficiently advanced magic on this show. So if you liked that, keep going, because they just keep going, man. It's just so good.
Yep. Arcanum Unbound and the Arcane Ascension are like books 1 and 3 on my list, and book 2 is actually, I might switch it around a little bit, so I'm going to hold off on that. But yeah, both of those are on my pretty top tier on my list of things to read.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. Big fan of Andrew Rowe. Also, the narrator, Nick Podell, is top notch. Real big fan of his narrating style. He narrates The Name of the Wind too. So
I was gonna say I remember that from way back before that we even like. I think listening to his audiobook was. Yeah, that was our first full book. Sorry, our first full book where I actually listened to the audiobook specifically instead of reading the physical book. And it was at your recommendation, Adam, specifically, and may I say, absolutely worth it. So worth listening to and reading.
Yeah. Well, if you guys want to know more about us, head over to dmstable.com. Otherwise, thank you for joining us tonight, and we hope to
Yeah,
see
thank you,
you in
everyone.
the future.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Loved having you. Loved chatting about this book, and we'll see you next book.